Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I, Shambhavi Raghuvanshi, and I, Shreya Shivare, welcome you all to the International Conference on Viksit Bharat 2047, Pioneering Transformation and Shaping Global Landscape. Viksit Bharat at 2047 is an ambitious initiative by the Indian government that envisions transforming India into a developed nation by the year 2047, the 100th year of its independence. The vision encompasses a wide range of development goals, including economic prosperity, social progress, environmental sustainability, and effective governance. To throw more light and to embark the beginning of this international conference, I now call upon stage Dr. Suraj Kamre.
Thank you, Shambhavi. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the International Conference on Viksit Bharat 2047, Pioneering Transformation and Shaping Global Business Landscape, reflecting the vision set forth by the Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi. As we convene today, we embark on a collective journey to realize Prime Minister Modi's vision of a prosperous, inclusive, and globally influential India by 2047, the centenary of our nation's independence. It's truly an honor to stand before such a distinguished gathering of scholars, professionals, and visionaries who are committed to shaping the future of our nation and the world at large. As we gather here today, we embark on a journey of exploration, innovation, and collaboration aimed at envisioning India of 2047. The India that is not only developed but thrives at the forefront of global business and societal transformation. The theme of this conference, Viksit Bharat 2047, encapsulates our collective aspirations for a progressive and inclusive India, poised to lead in an ever evolving global landscape. The importance of this conference cannot be overstated. It serves as a melting pot for ideas, a platform for dialogue, and a catalyst for action. By bringing together thought leaders, experts, and practitioners from diverse fields, this conference provides a unique opportunity to foster collaboration and exchange. It is a forum where academia meets industry, where policy intersects with practice, and where visionaries come together to shape the future. Through the series of keynote addresses, panel discussion, and paper presentations, we aim to explore the various aspects of India's journey towards development and its impact on the global business landscape. We will discuss topics ranging from innovation and entrepreneurship to sustainable development and inclusive growth, examining the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. Moreover, this conference serves as call to action. It is not just a place for discussion, but a platform for concrete initiatives and partnership that can drive real change. By fostering collaboration among stakeholders, including government, industry, academia, and civil society, we can catalyze collective action towards our shared vision of developed India 2047. I urge each one of us gathered here today to actively engage, participate, and contribute to the discussion ahead. Let us harness the power of ideas, insights, and innovations to chart a course towards a Viksit Bharat 2047 that inspires not only our generation but those to come in future. Together, let us pioneer transformation, shape the global business landscape, and propel India towards a future of boundless possibilities. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. Viksit Bharat 2047. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Moving on, it is with great honor and privilege that we welcome our esteemed chief guest, Mr. Aashish Chandorkar, to the international conference. Sir is a counselor, a lateral entrant to the Government of India, working at the Permanent Mission of India to the World Trade Organization in Geneva. He is responsible for multilateral trade negotiations, defending India's trade interest, and shaping global rules. He has worked for over 2 decades in management consulting and banking industries. He has authored two books, one on Maharashtra politics and one on India's COVID-19 vaccine story. His book on vaccines was appreciated by Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi and launched by Health Minister Shri Mansukh Mandavia. Sir hails from Indore, is settled in Pune, but is currently based in Geneva. Sir, your presence here today truly adds to the significance of this gathering, and we are deeply grateful for your time and support. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Shikha Jain, Dr. Kambre, Professor Shweta Jain, and distinguished guests. Let me begin by expressing my deep gratitude to the Institute of Management Development and Research, Pune, for inviting me for this conference as the chief guest. Uh, I have previously spoken at IMDR when my first book was published, so this is not the first time that I'm engaging with this audience. But Pune is, of course, my home, and then it was possible to be there in person. This time, I hope you would countenance my online virtual presence, given that I'm not currently in India and working for the government here in Geneva on national duties. What I'll do today is that I'll explain my understanding of what Viksit Bharat is, the various dimensions in which we need to work on those themes, what is currently being done as well, in terms of the government action, as well as what's happening around us on that theme, and then paint a picture towards how the country would look like as we approach the 100 years of independence. And then, of course, we can take some questions and answers, as was the plan in the schedule. So, in the last few months, the phrase Viksit Bharat has become routine to our lexicon. We read this phrase all the time in the media or in the public discourse. We have also seemed to have, as Professor Kambre said, we have also internalized this phrase to a large extent, where we fully believe that India, that is Bharat, will be a developed country by the year 2047. Let me, however, emphasize that this audacious visualization is actually not very old. In fact, it's not even a year when PM Shri Narendra Modi first talked about this. Uh, that was in the month of May of 2023, when during a Niti Aayog conference with the states, he had talked about this conceptualization, this idea that India can dream of being a developed country when we reach the 100 years of our independence in the form of this modern nation state. So, how is it that an idea which germinated less than a year ago today drives our national consciousness? I believe that the answer lies in the fearlessness and the enormity of the proposition of this vision. The term, when we hear the term developed country, this is not a term to be used loosely. There are certain technical connotations. The, there are different definitions which are offered by multilateral institutions like the IMF or the World Bank. And there are certain criteria which these institutions lay down to define what is known as a developed country. Most of the times, these definitions tend to have an economic dimension, which is that there's a per capita income, there's a certain level of prosperity in the society, and that's how they measure which countries should be called or which countries should be categorized in which in which bucket, like developed country, developing country, etc. But what if I tell you that in the modern era, only two countries, which is Japan and South Korea, have really truly graduated from being developing to developed as per these criteria set forth by multilateral institutions. So this is actually not a very common proposition. The audaciousness of the vision comes from the fact that uh, very few countries have actually transitioned from being developing to developed. The countries which have industrialized before India, especially in Southeast Asia, of course, also have got caught in what is the called the middle income trap, where they reached a certain level of prosperity, but never really breached the threshold at which they can be called developed countries. Of course, China comes close. It has still not made it. There's still some way to go for China as well, even on the per capita income basis. So really, the vision that we are chasing and the dream that we are dreaming is not something which has been commonly fulfilled, and that makes it even more exciting to chase the dream, to work towards a goal which the world has not commonly seen, except in perhaps Japan and South Korea. Of course, there are several large economies in Asia, Latin America, which have come close to be called developed, but have not really made the cut finally, or somehow in some cases they have plateaued before they reached that economic indicators which IMF and World Bank prescribe for the developed classification. I'm of course talking about large countries. There are obviously smaller island countries, etc., which can be classified as developed, but those are more of an exception and not the norm. So we have the upcoming 25 years, or perhaps a little less than that, to shape and concretize our version of what a developed country would look like. Uh, Knowing very well that very few have achieved this ambition before us, this period, which is being dubbed as the Amrit Kal by Prime Minister Modi, will take us to 100 years of a modern nation state. We, of course, need to remember that the modern nation state was born through a series of historical events. Uh, However, our civilization ethos is thousands of years old. It is important not to lose sight of this continuity of knowledge when we are devising our own version of Viksit Bharat. Let me spell out this dream in three different dimensions, which is economic, political, and social. It is important to paint this holistic picture rather than just looking at the economic dimension, which would be just one of the three areas in which we need to make progress. So, firstly, on the economic dimension, uh, we can of course talk about an Atmanirbhar Bharat, which I believe is the foundational element of becoming a Viksit Bharat. The concept of Atmanirbharta denotes anti-fragility and a certain sense of resilience to what is happening in the world around us. Atmanirbhar is not a defensive concept. Sometimes this is made out to be like that. When PM Modi first announced this concept in May 2020, when India was coming out of the first wave of pandemic, several commentators compared this to the idea of self-sufficiency or import substitution, which was prevalent in the 1970s and 80s. And if you read the economic literature of those times, this was a very popular idea around the world, especially in the developing countries. But really, it was later discovered that just trying to impose import substitution did not work for most countries. However, nothing would be further from truth uh, when we compare the enormity of the vision that underpins Atmanirbhar Bharat to perhaps an older idea of import substitution. When we talk about self-sufficiency today, we are not talking about closing our doors to the world at large. In fact, the concept is exactly the opposite. We are talking about engaging the world, learning from it, and inviting the world to India to tap into our vast talent pool, market potential, and undying hope for a better tomorrow. We are talking about engaging with the world, where any particular feature which can be used against another country is being weaponized. It is crucial to prioritize skills and capabilities which lead to reduced volatility and increased certainty. And that is today the idea of Atmanirbharta, which is not defensive, but it is actually building upon our own strengths. Let me give you a few examples, which are practical examples, and you will relate to them. So during the pandemic, we had situations where containers required to ship things around the world were actually stuck either in Shanghai or in Los Angeles for long periods of time. Many countries in Europe and Asia, even if they were producing something useful for the world, did not actually have a means to ship them around the world. Uh, the, the, uh, the industries which were modeled on the modern day management principles, as we learn in our operations research or economics classes of just-in-time management or efficient inventory management, those theories went for a toss during the period of pandemic because ultimately the supply chains were not strong enough to support the realization of those theories during a global crisis. So we learned that the boundary conditions in which these theories apply made the theories to fail when there was a global crisis. Another example of the pandemic times was pharmaceuticals. The world suddenly realized that simple medical supplies like the three-ply masks or the active pharmaceutical ingredients, even for something as basic as paracetamol tablets and key starting materials for most drug formulations, were just not manufactured widely enough. The entire production was concentrated in just one geography. So when there was a global crisis and you did not have access to very simple ingredients, even for pharmaceuticals, there was of course a panic which set in those days. We are also seeing how the regional conflicts today can have a global footprint. Cheap drones can paralyze shipping lanes as well as standing armies. There are so many shipping choke points around the world. It only takes a few determined naysayers to shut down navigational arteries responsible for keeping the world running in the form that we recognize in the global trade. So Atmanirbhar Bharat is essentially a response to such eventualities. Uh, we will, of course, continue to live in a global workplace, and we are not receding inwards. What needs to be appreciated, however, is that openness to the world does not mean accepting subservient culture of innovation or diminishing our own level of aspiration. We are deliberately choosing mindful level playing field and a pursuit of excellence over mindless globalization. We are not shunning globalization. We are instead recognizing its limitations and the rough edges which our adversaries can use against us. So, an Atmanirbhar Bharat is not disengaging with the world, but rather having a call option, as we call in the financial markets, to exercise when there's a market failure or when we encounter the risks of overconcentration of production capacities or technological innovation. An active pursuit of higher order capacities aligned with global technological progress, which boosts the culture of designing, tinkering, and building, is integral to the notion of Atmanirbharta, and that is what the country proposes to work towards in the Amrit Kal. The country will also need simultaneous access to and advances in multiple technologies. This presents an opportunity to devise indigenous solutions and technology stacks in a range of areas. Building value chain competencies in niche technologies at a scale that India offers for deployment at a population scale is also an unparalleled market opportunity. So that was the idea in an economic dimension. Let us now look at the political dimension of what a Viksit Bharat would look like. So as we know, India is a vibrant democracy with opinions and counter opinions. It is important to ensure that our multifariousness is not used against us by those who wish ill on us. We've been taught the maxim of unity in diversity in our educational system. Let me reverse this proposition for you and explain that why India is shining example of diversity in unity, where unity comes first and then the diversity around us, what we observe, uh, basically celebrates that central notion of unity. So first and foremost, India is one country, modern day embodiment of an old civilization, which is a unified civilization and quite easy to understand empirically. From Tripura to Tamil Nadu and from Kerala to Kashmir, there are common stories, ideas, values, and behaviors which are naturally bound by the quintessence of a common land. In this united geography, we have the modern day India, which has many states, languages, religions, foods, clothes, and rituals. But what really unites us is not just the mere rituals or the things which we observe on the surface. What unites us first and foremost is the values and the cultures. And a closer scrutiny will tell us that the common abstract notion of values and cultures are deeply ingrained, which then devolve to more materialistic differences. So, hence, the idea for us should be diversity in unity and not just unity in diversity. The central notion of country has to be strong enough, which is our belief system. A powerful united country can serve as one of the poles of the emerging multipolar world. Viksit Bharat has to simultaneously manage a reawakening at home and a sense of responsibility in the international sphere. Our way of life has been summarized in the popular shlok in the Maha Upanishad, which says that Ayam Nijaha Paro Veti Ganana Laguchetasam Udara Charitnam tu Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which literally means that those with small minds think that some people are their close ones and others are strangers. But the entire world is one family, and let us be large hearted and magnanimous in recognizing that. So, this mantra of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam will be our guiding light as in the Samrit Kal. And we are already working on those ideals. So, be it rescuing citizens of other countries along with our own from the war torn areas, or to be the first responder when there's a natural disaster in Nepal or Turkey. We are already practicing what we preach. When the pandemic struck, India sent medicines to more than 150 countries and vaccines to more than 100 countries. Vaccine Maitri was a statement of this large-heartedness. My book, which was mentioned in the introduction, which was called Braving a Viral Storm, that book also documented our work towards the conceptualization of a global world where we could all collaborate and cooperate to solving a global crisis. Viksit Bharat will also have to take greater interests in global affairs and, in fact, drive how the rules are made and shaped in the different spheres of global governance. The world is now recognizing the need for reforming multilateralism. On its part, India has also tried to create more space for itself, not reconciling with merely following the rules, but also trying to shape the rules in the new world order. And this effort to shape the world order sometimes does go unnoticed. So let me spend a few minutes in giving you some examples of how we are working on institutional capacities and how we are trying to solve this problem of the global institutions being 50, 60 years old, which were all formed in the wake of the Second World War, and how India is contributing towards that change. What we are working on are to create institutions which are domain specific, narrowly defined to achieve specific objectives and to address specific problems common to the humanity. And this key conceptualization that we have had on the international institutions, a common theme is that we are working towards the concepts of environment and biodiversity. These new institutions which India has brought to life all have environmental themes, which also demonstrates our civilizational ethos, which treasures coexistence and inclusivity. And there are four such examples, and I'll talk to you about all those four examples. Firstly, we have the International Solar Alliance, which was the first international organization conceptualized and set up by India. This was when India partnered with France on the sidelines of the 2015 Conference of Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change in Paris, setting up the ISA to drive practical solutions to addressing the challenges posed by climate change. The ISA is headquartered in Gurgaon and has made steady progress in bringing the benefits of solar power to poor and vulnerable economies around the world. It was the first international organization to be headquartered in India. Following that, uh, we worked on the setting up of the Coalition of Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, or CDRI, which was announced by Prime Minister Modi in 2019 at the UN Climate Action Summit in New York. Again, headquartered in New Delhi, the CDRI is set up as a multi-stakeholder organization which promotes research and knowledge sharing in the area of disaster resilience. The CDRI seeks to develop disaster resilient social and economic infrastructure, which is a key requirement for climate adaptation. When India took over the presidency of G20, and that heralded the formation of another environment focused international organization, which is called the Global Biofuels Alliance, or the GBA. In this case, the US played a key partnership role. The GBA was announced during PM Modi's visit to the US in June 2023, and then the detailed announcement was made later during the G20 Leaders Summit in September 2023 in New Delhi. So this alliance seeks to promote the use of biofuels, which would then further drive environmental sustainability. Finally, the most recent announcement or the most recent entrant to this club is called the International Big Cat Alliance, or IBCA. The IBCA will also be headquartered in India. PM Modi first mooted this idea at the Global Tiger Day celebrations in 2019. But then, of course, there was the time of pandemic, etc. And then the intent was reaffirmed in April 2023 when India commemorated the 50 years of India's Project Tiger. The IBCA was formally approved earlier in January this year, aiming at a secure future for big cats and preservation of habitats in which these animals exist. So, apart from the fact that India's reimagination of the global order is based on positive themes of cooperation and conservation, these initiatives also seek to partner with other international agencies, donor organizations, and global experts to drive the stated outcomes. These institutional arrangements seek to work on very specific issues, not seeking to position themselves as think tanks or strategy houses. These organizations are distinguished by their action orientation, scale of ambition, and diversity of imagination. So this again shows that politically India influences the world, and that's already changing in the way we approach this issue. India has, of course, had spirited diversification and engagement through initiatives such as G20, the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, or BIMSTEC, BRICS, I2U2, which is India, Israel, UAE, and USA, Quad, which is Australia, India, Japan, USA, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And that shows that the focus of Viksit Bharat will be on multi-engagement and to have a set of institutions which will have a very definite India footprint. Of course, there's a long way to go on this dimension, but we have already made some very strong start. Third, after looking at the economic and political dimensions, let me look at the social dimension. Now, some may question, why are we talking about a social dimension when it comes to questions of economics and geopolitics? In fact, talking to you on International Women's Day, it will be remiss of me to not talk about this very significant dimension of being a developed country. There has to be a commitment towards creating an inclusive, just, and fair society where no one is left behind. This is also the concept of Antyodaya, where the last person standing in the last row must not be deprived of the fruits of development and the access to the state capacity. The metamorphosis to the journey of Viksit Bharat will bring and which will be shaped over the next 2 decades, will undoubtedly involve orbital changes in the national capacities and projections. But it is important to see that this capacity enhancement is a continuous and gradual process, and it touches upon all sections of the society equally. The keyword which embodies this process in the best possible manner, I would say, is the word saturation. Viksit Bharat will shape the governance delivery towards a saturation endpoint where all citizens around the country will have access to reliable basic amenities like energy, financial inclusion, housing, sanitation, water. So, this idea of saturation end state will lead to national productivity gains in several ways, be it creating the safety net of a single payer healthcare for a large part of the population, or designing an educational policy that focuses on real world learning outcomes. The best way is to observe what works around the world, but also tailors the experiences for our own requirements. For the citizens who will now be equipped with elements essential for personal and social dignity and participation in the national development process, the range of options as well as the depth of engagement in undertaking productive economic pursuits would then widen, in which everyone can contribute to the best personal extent possible towards the goal of Viksit Bharat. This kind of a saturation access to basic amenities also boosts both the ambition levels and the confidence to achieve them. Uh, there's a psychic and fiscal cost of assuring day-to-day predictability, and that goes down significantly when people believe that they have access to what they need to live a productive lifestyle. And then there'll be a firm floor for all Indians to stand on and to contribute economically. For the state also, when a lot of capacity that is today required to deliver the basic building blocks of human capital, uh, that capacity can then be reallocated by the state. A large part of that time, effort, and capacity can shift gears and target step economic outcomes and innovative ideas. So this will be the process in which we can drive the national creativity and animal spirits. The government machinery at all levels will be able to shift focus from providing for inputs to emphasize on output and have an outcome orientation. So social indicators not just help individuals, but it also help the government machinery itself to focus on the next set of deliverables which are required to create a developed country. Let me recall the brilliant words of India's first woman fighter pilot, Avni Chaturvedi, who incidentally hails from my home state of Madhya Pradesh. When she joined the Indian Air Force in 2018, she said, and I paraphrase, these are not exact words, the machine does not know whether the person operating it is a man or a woman. And that's the society in which we need to be living in 25 years later, where irrespective of where we come from, whatever our origins are, we are all able to contribute towards a specific national goal without the baggage of histories or precedences. So the three dimensions, economic, political, and social, bring me to the idea of the comprehensive national capacities or capabilities. Looking back in history, a definitive lesson can be learned from countries that developed on the back of these distinct national capacities. Let us take the example of the US, which is considered an innovative society where creative destruction led economy. Or we can also look at the rise of Japan, which is the world's electronic powerhouse. And both these examples were a result of homegrown, fit for context economic and industrial policies, along with social development. Strength in specific sectors and the ability to shape the global business flows buttressed the economic rise of these countries. As a rising power, we can imbibe the right lessons from those who have traversed this path before us. While it will be good to be a sponge for motivating ideas, it is also important to recognize that our size, complexity, and variation poses challenges which will require bespoke and not just template responses. We cannot divorce our choices from a larger strategic context. As we overcome our vulnerabilities, we also need to change our mindset to ensure that we don't confuse globalized thinking with running down our own future. India has to immerse itself in the ongoing process of reconfiguration of multilateralism and globalization to develop this keen sense of what is called the comprehensive national capabilities. Our economic strength has to be intertwined with high quality human capital, which then has to achieve results which further national interests. I would like to recall a line from External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar's book, Why Bharat Matters, where he sums up the situation aptly by saying that, and I quote, India's destiny is bigger than to be a part of the future of others, unquote. Viksit Bharat is about shaping our own future, learning from the world, but applying our own life lessons and our own designs to achieving this goal. Let me make one more substantial point, and that is the spirit of Jan Bhagidari. None of what I've spoken about today will have much meaning unless the nature of Amrit Kal is participatory. Yes, Viksit Bharat is an ambitious and groundbreaking plan to achieve India's full potential and propel the country to unprecedented development and prosperity. But this is not a plan that just belongs to the government. It's not a responsibility of just a few individuals. Viksit Bharat will require collective efforts from every citizen because it is also about transforming ourselves. We need to be more open to absorbing new ideas. We need to be more vigilant about tapping new opportunities which are presented to us in our country and as the world which changes around us. We will also have to believe in ourselves and in each other that together we can challenge the status quo. Our collective might and resolve is no lesser than undertaking the transformation required in skills, mindsets, goals, and ways of working to achieve these lofty outcomes. The more we do, the more we will reinforce our self-belief. It is this positive self-reinforcing loop which will stand us in good stead. And hence the idea of Jan Bhagidari is important because uh, in a Viksit Bharat, we need to act not just individually, but collectively towards a common goal, towards a common purpose. In this regard, this attempt by IMDR to host an academic conference is greatly appreciated. Over the years in India, the academia, the industry, and the government have not been as closely coordinated as you see in other countries, especially the developed ones. Especially so, the academia has been traditionally hands off from real economic or developmental problems. This, of course, has started changing, like this conference shows. And I think for the past several years, we have tried to make amends to this separation of academia, industry, and the government. But there's a long way to go, and there's no greater service what the academia can do for the country than addressing real problems or designing solutions which are practical and which impact common people. So such exchanges of ideas, which we will witness in this conference, they provide an ideal platform for producing high quality intellectual fuel for policymakers and industry alike. So thank you to IMDR for organizing this conference. Uh, we need to develop a complete blueprint for the country's prosperity, not think of Viksit Bharat just as a catchphrase. From my personal experience of representing the country at an international platform, I can tell you that there's immense interest about India. Uh, there are people who track the news and events of India very, very regularly. This is not an exception anymore for the international community. People are trying to learn more and demonstrate genuine curiosity about us. So sometimes, we may see that the world views us from their own prism, and the tinted glasses may sometimes blur that vision. And this occasionally leads to misplaced criticism emanating from preconceived notions or attempts to force fit India to existing ideological or epistemological persuasions. But in general, the urge to know more about our plans, ideas, and way of thinking sincerely interests the global community today. India is in many ways a sui generis case which cannot be really compared with any other country like to like because of our own peculiarities. And hence hence it is our collective responsibility to explain ourselves better to the world. It's not just about countering narratives, but it's also about shaping narratives about India, about explaining the way we see our own country, the way we understand our own country, and not just rely on someone else's perception of what progress or what changes are being seen in India. Uh, we need not seek anyone's approval, but we need to further the two-way understanding here. Uh, we learn more about the world and project more of us to the world as well. This two-way dialogue is very important in the process of uh, the journey to Viksit Bharat. So to not just be an inward-looking powerhouse, but to be the global growth engine of prosperity, wisdom, balance, and reason. Uh, in the end, let us remember that the theme of India's successful G20 presidency, One Earth, One Family, One Future, what will shape our vision and our actions. Viksit Bharat will not just transform our destiny, but will also play a crucial role in transforming the world itself. I thank you for your attention. Jai Hind.
Now, we would like to open the forum to the audience for a question answer round. Please feel free to ask questions.
No, sir. Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji once famously remarked. Hello, sir. My name is Pratik Poddar. I'm an assistant professor at IMDR. So Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji once famously remarked that you can choose your friends, but you cannot choose your neighbors. So as we move on towards the pathway of a developed nation, we will be always surrounded by a neighborhood which will not enjoy the three parameters of Vikasit, which you just mentioned, which is political, economic, and social. So there is always a possibility that looms around with this crisis of immigration and illegal immigration that can prove to be a problematic situation in the coming number of years because the same has happened in North America and Europe. So how do you see this as a challenge to the dream of Viksit Bharat of 2047?
Sure. Thank you for that question. The If you see the neighborhood in general, as in the past few days, also Dr. Jaishankar has pointed out in several of his interactions that our neighborhood has been. I mean, there are a set of countries with which we have engaged. We have helped them in their crisis. We have, for example, he quotes the case of Sri Lanka, where we extended like almost $4 billion of lines of credit when Sri Lanka was going through a crisis. Please note that when countries go to IMF for seeking financial assistance, they are sometimes seeking like 1, 2, 3 billion in what would stabilize their economy. India actually extended more than 4 billion lines of credit just ourselves to Sri Lanka. There are of course new connectivity options being explored with Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal. There's electricity being exported from Bhutan and Nepal. There are economic corridors uh, through India into Bangladesh for those countries. We are using the Bangladesh's ports, for example. So there's a lot happening in our neighborhood, which is good and positive. Of course, we cannot. We cannot predict someone else's action, but India's view has been that strong neighborhood is very critical for our own position in the world. The problems that you mentioned are real issues to be addressed. Uh, these problems can be faced in future. I mean, we are talking about not today, but I think what you hint at is what might happen in the next few decades. The answer to a lot of that is regional prosperity and being prepared for any such eventuality, where we are able to defend our borders. And I think some of the actions which you see in the recent, for example, the on the Myanmar border, if you track what has happened in the last 2 months, I think in some ways that kind of sets a precedence towards some of those issues and what our response could be to those problems.
Good morning, sir. This is Krish. I'm a student of Ferguson College. I wanted to ask a very simple question. There are many internal and external forces which are working against India. So, how is the government specifically dealing with the forces, and what challenges do these forces pose to the dream of Viksit Bharat 2047?
Yeah. So, I mean, let me answer this question in my personal capacity. I think I don't speak for the government in this conference, but you're right in saying that when a country rises, it is, of course, that rise is challenged. It doesn't go unnoticed by those who do not wish well for us, both internally and externally. So we do have the situation where the forces, or some of the forces which will not like the fact that we are making progress. In many ways, so there are two ways to look at it. One, and I think I kind of hinted on both in my speech. Firstly, I think the developing an economic strength is very, very critical, because the world respects that economic strength. When we do have the means and ways of uh, navigating those situations, I mean, in a financial sense, it becomes easier to counter some of those forces. And very importantly, to put out your own narrative. As I mentioned in the closing of my speech, it is also important to explain ourselves to the world. Sometimes some of the criticism comes not because of any malicious intent, but simply out of ignorance. People just don't understand how complex the country India is. And in that sense, having our own narrative is very, very important. Not just criticizing what others are saying, or not just reacting or responding to what someone else is saying, right? And of course, that brings me to the second point, which is that then you need to have an institutional framework to do this, because how else do you project your narrative, right? And unless you have institutions where you can talk, you can engage with people, where you can uh, uh, have platforms where India's view is heard in a neutral sense, uh, this objective cannot be fulfilled. And which is why, as I mentioned, we are working on several international platforms on these institutions of tomorrow, the arrangements of tomorrow. Another good example, I can give a practical example, is the Raisina dialogues, which you might have heard about, which happens in Delhi, right? We all talk about global conferences, we talk about these think tank events, but now the MEA, along with the ORF Research Foundation, they actually organize this Raisina dialogue, which has now become one of the premier events in the global think tank circuit, and in the based on geopolitical conversations. So these platforms then afford us an opportunity for projecting our view. Another good example is in Pune itself. So you might have heard of Pune International Center, which is one of the premier kind of think tanks based out of Pune. The PIC holds an annual event called the Asia Economic Dialogue. In fact, the previous event happened just the previous week, the last week actually, end Feb, early March, where again thinkers around the world come together and discuss issues where India has a stake. So I think these institutional arrangements are very important to put forth our views, and to to explain the complexities of India and our responses, our ways of thinking. Uh, the, the future lies not just in criticism, or I mean pushing back on others, but to really shape, firstly get clarity on what we stand for, and then to explain that to the world at large.
Hello, Suprabhat sir. My name is Rohit Mulya, student of PhD IMDR. I'd like to lay the premise of my question by quoting a German philosopher, Goethe, who says, he who cannot draw from 3,000 years of history is living hand to mouth. So on the basis, Or like when we talk about globalization and trade routes, we often talk about Silk Route, but we miss out on spice routes, which India has been the source of and roots of. And drawing back from 17th century, where India was contributing about 23% of the global GDP, where spices were the main thing. I'd like you to throw some light on uh, the development of the temples and religious spaces in India in the current state under the leadership of Sri Narendra Modi ji, and in forces of uh, institutional capacity for the focus of developing these, regaining the strength of these trade routes.
Sure. So on the trade routes, let me address that first. So as you know that we are currently, there was an idea floated called the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, which was announced during the G20, India's G20 presidency. That route actually is in fact what you were talking about as a traditional spice route, right? Like when merchants used to come from Europe to India, the route they would often take is what would mirror the modern day the IMEC corridor whenever that is realized. Of course, there are situations to be dealt with in the Middle East, but once we tide over those events, the route that you talk about essentially is what IMEC would be, which would then connect Italy and Greece to India, the western coast of India. So that work is already going on. There's also the international north-south transport corridor, which again connects the Russian west coast to or the Scandinavian countries to India. That is another talk which has been going on. Again, there are regional issues to be dealt with there, but clearly there's potential, which was again the corridor used by traders and even armies actually from other parts of Asia earlier. We have also worked on the Vladivostok Chennai shipping route. That is another route that is being explored in terms of greater trade, and that would again go through the Southeast Asia, uh, which was again part of the old spice route shipping lane. So I think what you mentioned, some of it is already being worked upon or planned. Again, these are complex projects and involve several countries, so we just don't define some of that ourselves. There's a lot of international cooperation required to realize these new ideas. On the question of our heritage, our temples, I mean, a lot is already happening right around us. I mean, from Ayodhya to Varanasi to Jain to Dwarka, Somnath. I mean, whole a lot of these centers of learning. I mean, temples were not just a religious. I mean, these places were not just a religious places. These were also the centers for uh, you know social collective action for learning, for debating ideas, for essentially creating the base of knowledge which would then propel the society. So I think some of that revitality is again coming back. I mean, of course, this is a long process, something which we have lost over the last 400-500 years. So to say that it will completely go back or completely mirror what the situation was 500 years ago in a short period of time, obviously is not practical. But a start has been made, and of course, it's the collective responsibility. The government can create the infrastructure and the enabling elements, right? But eventually, some of the learning or some of the research or the debate and the discussion is essentially society's job. It is not really something which the government can do beyond a point. So I think the infrastructure is now there. Hopefully, these centers will now become big drivers of religious tourism, of learning, and of revitalizing our ancient wisdom.
Hello, sir. Professor Nishita this side from IMDR. It has been quite an insightful session so far, sir. You mentioned while you were delivering your talk that there have been quite a few countries who have embarked on a similar journey towards a Viksit nation before. And interestingly, you mentioned that there have been a situation where they faced a plateau and then they stopped there somehow. There was a struggle. It would be nice to know your perspective related to our journey and your view to where do you see that we would face a few bottlenecks or plateaus on our journey to Viksit Bharat. Thank you so much.
Sure. So that's a great question, especially in the economic dimension. And I refer mainly to Southeast Asia and some countries in South America. What happens is that countries can essentially become older before they become richer, and that's the conundrum that we are trying to resolve in India. That there's a window of opportunity in which we can grow rich, but it needs to have the underpinning social strengths to take us to that level of a certain per capita income. What happened in Southeast Asia and also in South America is that the society became older, where the number of people required to run to or to achieve a certain level of prosperity just weren't available in the workforce. And which is why we see several countries in Southeast Asia around the 8, 10, 11, 12,000 per capita income mark, but not much of a hope for them to go beyond that. I mean, they will still progress, but and they may still actually hit the World Bank definition of what a developed country is, but perhaps would then stagnate around those levels. And the reason is that the demographics are not in their favor. Their societies will not have enough individuals to really work on a very comprehensive path to development. There's also I mean, of course, some societies, as you know, are trying to import workers. When we hear that in Taiwan or in Japan or some countries are looking at getting workers from abroad. But again, there are finite dimensions to what you can do on that count, right? Because the countries which can then supply labor are also not that many. And I mean, we're talking about skilled labor, which a labor force which has also got certain level of education and certain level of a commitment towards certain sectoral competencies. So unless there is a massive migration of people or movement of people around the world from, let's say, South Asia, from Africa, uh, into these countries, it is highly unlikely that they will be able to go beyond a certain level of per capita income. Now, for India, what is different is that our population is still growing, but our working population is also growing. For the next 20, 30 years, we will be in a situation where we will have more people enter the workforce. And these people, of course, they have to be trained, they have to be skilled. You have to, it's not just about having number of people, it's also about what their competencies are. So that is the intervention which is required on a policy side, which is the educational policies, the skilling policies. I think that obviously is something which needs to be done. But we do have a window of about 2 to 3 decades, which other countries don't have. And in some cases, for other countries, that window is already closed unless they promote massive scale migration. But as we know, massive migration also leads to other social problems because of lack of assimilation and differences of opinions, ways of lifestyle differences, and so on. So most countries are loath to having that kind of a massive migration. They may have some migration, but not at a scale which is required to completely reignite the economic growth of these economies. So that's the difference that we have between India and some of these countries, and let's hope that we make the most of it in the next 2 decades.
Thank you so much, sir.
Hi, Ashish. Happy to meet you online. So it was a
Hello.
fantastic talk and extremely insightful, as Nishita just mentioned. You were just saying that we have about 20 years or so vis-a-vis other countries. This audience sitting in the auditorium today would be credited with propelling our country towards the Viksit Bharat 2047 vision, because they are the part of that young and part of the demographic dividend, so to say. So, Ashish, any messages for them? How to ride on the tide? What to do next? And how to be a part of this whole achievement of the dream of Viksit Bharat?
Sure. Thank you so much for the kind words on the talk. You're absolutely right in saying that the lot of the work has to be done by the next generation, the young generation. My main message would be that we need to be fearless. We need to believe that the world is our stage of operations. what we can achieve need not be restricted to Pune or Maharashtra or to India. These boundaries eventually are, I mean, they are important in the sense of our culture and so on. But in terms of what we can achieve economically, we need not be constrained by our imagination. Uh, the global growth that will take place, for example, in the coming, let's say, few years, almost 50% of all global growth will happen just in 4 countries, which is US, China, India, and Indonesia, right? And the proportion of India will continue to rise. So uh, what we can build from India need not just be for India. Of course, India itself is a huge market opportunity and will remain so in the near future. But I think the 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 size of our ambition needs to change. The belief that we can do something at a global stage and solve problems at a global stage, I think that belief needs to really be internalized. Uh, we have started. I mean, India was not a very rich country all this while. We are still about 2,500 per capita income. But I think the greatest service that we can do to ourselves is to not have poverty of ambition. We need to have a real broad mind towards what awaits us. And really, the next 2-3 decades are the golden period. So the generation that enters the economic workforce today actually has that opportunity to change the way my generation thought or the previous generations thought around what the definition of prosperity was. So I think in a connected world, there's a lot more to do, and let us hope that some of that leadership comes from this young generation, also from the IMDR students.
Just one more question, Ashish. So you are representing India at the global stage. How does the world look at India?
Yeah, no, there's an immense curiosity about India right now, right? Like, for example, let's say, just I can take the example of WTO itself. So we had this ministerial conference in Abu Dhabi last week. We were all in Abu Dhabi for a few days. If you read the reports on what transpired there, I mean, I'm talking about international reports, not Indian reports. But if you talk about, say, international media, almost every media report will talk about India's role. Some of it is also negative. I mean, people also criticize India's role in some cases, but that's par for the course. As a rising power, you meet both types of reactions to any action, right? So it could be positive or negative. But the point is that without the centrality of an Indian view, or without understanding what India was saying, there's hardly any commentary these days on any of the global forums. I think that curiosity, as I mentioned, some of the times the criticism emanates not because they want to criticize, but they don't understand India well enough, right? And it's of course our job, people like me who are sitting in these institutions. It's our job to keep chipping at that problem by explaining ourselves better and in a more forceful and in an honest way, right? I mean, as I mentioned, India is a sui generis case. We cannot be compared with any other society or any other country in a very direct way. So as long as we are able to explain our ways of thinking, how ambitious this society is, what the constraints that we face, I think that without being defensive about it, I mean, this is every country has some problem or the other, right? So it's not that there's any ideal society around the world. So in that sense, I think that dialogue with the world has to continue to happen. But of course, there's not just great curiosity, but there's also this deep interest about the business opportunities, the tracking of news and events in India, opening up of new factories, for example, like companies moving into India. A lot of that discourse is very common in international forums, and when we meet, when I meet my counterparts, those dialogues are very. I mean, people have this genuine take around what is happening or what is changing in India, why these changes are going on, like what is the government doing, or what are the people doing. So we need to tap into it in a positive way and shape it to our collective advantage.
Thank you, sir, for gracing us with your presence today and delivering such a motivational and inspiring address. We all are truly honored to have someone of your excellence to share your insights and experiences with us. Your guidance and encouragement will undoubtedly guide us as we embark on our future endeavors. Once again, thank you, sir.